Hello everyone, this is Dr. Rekha, resource person for Mahatma Gandhi National Council of Rural Education. We are going to look at the module on management decision making tools, which is 107 course of business BBA rural management. In this module, we will be covering 4 chapters, and each chapter we will have 4 lessons, 4 to 5 lessons, and in total all the 4 chapters together will be having 20 lessons, 20 video lessons. Before we get into today's session, let us briefly look at the contents that we are going to cover in this module. We would be covering in the first chapter on introduction to research methods, second chapter on statistical inference and sampling from statistics, understanding PRA or PLA, and writing research report. And the module objectives: at the end of the module, the students will be able to introduce the basics of business situation analysis through research and design, to provide insights on PRA as well as PLA techniques, and to enable writing research reports. Learning outcomes are to do business, the students will be able to do business analysis, situation analysis through systematic research, to define research problem, choose appropriate research method and statistical method for analysis, will be able to execute the PRA as well as PLA exercise, and to write good research reports. So, as I have mentioned earlier, this module would include 20 video lessons of 4 chapters. So, in today's session, session 1, we would be we will be looking into introduction to research, role of statistics in management decisions, types of research, and determine when to conduct research. The session objectives are to define research, to explain role of statistics in management decisions, to comprehend on types of research, to determine when to conduct business research. Okay, now let us get into what is research. What do you mean by research? Re means again, search means looking around. So, looking around again and again. It is a continuous process. It is present in our everyday lives. Research is present in our everyday lives. Let us take an example. Let us say you want to buy a mobile or a laptop. What you would do? You would first find out from your friends what type of mobiles are available, which brands are available, what features they have, and what price they have bought that for. And then you will not leave it there. You will go and search online. You will search in Amazon, Flipkart, Snapdeal, and you try to compare the brands and try to compare the features, try to compare the prices, and also in which website or the discounts are available at a higher rate, right? You will not leave it there too. You may go to showroom, and you may also find out what type of mobiles are there, and again brands, features, cost, and then you compare whether it is cheaper to buy in the showroom or to buy in the online website through online, right? So, informally, without even knowing systematic process of doing research, we all tend to do a little bit of research, right? We do a research before making a decision to buy a laptop or a mobile, right? So, if we know how to carry out the research systematically, then the managers would be able to make effective decisions. If the managers would know the formal way of doing research, formal procedure or systematic way of doing research, then they will be able to make informed decisions, effective decisions in organizations. In organizations, managers make decisions every day. So, if it is backed up with the data, backed up with the information, the decisions made would be of high quality, would be very effective. So, there are tools that will facilitate the managers in enabling them to make decisions. So, we will be looking into some of the tools that they can use in order to make effective decisions in the module. Why do we have to do research? in order to improve the existing production process, or in order to innovate something so that the cost of production can be reduced, or there is a problem or a challenge that the employees are facing, or the farmers are facing, or the people are facing. So if we do research to solve that problem, find a solution for that challenge or that is existing already, right? For example, let's say let us take the example of a farming. Okay, the farmer uses traditional method of doing farming. If there is a technology that can be brought in order to speed up the process of farming, so instead of tilting the land manually, if we have a machinery to tilt it, then the work would get easier, would be done easier than using the traditional way of doing it, right? So the research is important. We have to continuously do research in innovating to identify new technologies, or to identify a new way of improving the production process, right? So we have to we all have to continuously do research. Let us see the definition, the formal definition of research. It is a systematic process of collecting, compiling, analyzing and interpreting data to provide quality information based on which a decision maker will be able to take a decision in an optimum manner. So it will enable the managers to make data driven decision, right? Not random decision making. They will be able to make informed decisions. It is data driven decision making which will be more effective. What are some of the characteristics of good research? So as I have already mentioned, it is a systematic process. There is a systematic procedure of carrying out a research. It has to be done step by step. So before identifying the problem, we cannot venture into collecting the data. We have to identify the challenge, we have to identify the problem, and then we have to go get into the data collection. Then only it would be appropriate. So there is a step by step procedure that has to be followed by a researcher. It's a systematic process. Valid and verifiable. Once the researcher have identified the findings, once the researcher have carried out the research and came out with certain type of findings, conclusions, it must be valid and verifiable by others. It must be valid and it must be verifiable by others. And the cyclical nature. So cyclical nature in the sense, once the researcher have identified solutions for the already existing challenges, then the researcher might come up with some other questions for some other challenges based on the findings. Let us take an example of a mentoring research. Okay, so mentoring is in the budding stage in India. In Indian context, it is still in the budding phase. It is not yet extensively researched. So a researcher tries to understand the mentoring using an exploratory method. He or she tries to understand the challenges or tries to understand the mentoring in Indian context, and tries to do a research and find out that the benefits for the mentors by being in the mentoring relationship. Benefits for the mentor by being in the mentoring relationship. What do mentors learn by being in the mentoring relationship? So the researcher have identified at the end of the research study that the mentors do learn by being in the mentoring relationship. But there arises some other questions based on that. So the researcher might have done research generally. It's an exploratory research because it is not yet already studied by others in the Indian context. This is a new and novel study that has been carried out by the researcher. So at the end of the study, because it cannot be generalized across the industries, because the researcher have studied generally, but taking a general sample, but it cannot be generalizable across the across different industries. So there arises the question that the researcher may go in doing in-depth study in each industry. The researcher can study in IT sector, in education sector, or in hospital industry, right? So that's one another. And another one is, since the researcher has focused only from the mentor's perspective, the further researchers may look into pairwise study, can look into the mentor-mentee relationship in each of these industries. So likewise, there might be many questions that might arise based on the findings of a research study. Okay, and then the generalization. So if a research is carried out, it may be generalizable or it may not be generalizable based on the nature of the study. The researchers might study, and then the findings of the research may be generalizable and may not be generalizable across the world. So it might be specific to countries also, or in some situations it might be generalizable. For example, the self-efficacy theory propagated by Bandura, right? So that's that can be generalized across the world. So it may be generalizable or may not be generalizable. And what is the role of statistics in management decisions? How it is helpful for the managers? How the statistics would be helpful for making decisions by the managers? The first one is focus on big picture. It will enable the managers to focus on big picture, right? For example, let us take an example of organic farming itself, right? So the manager, let's say it's a rural enterprise which is situated in one of the villages, and it is a potato chips manufacturing facility. And the manager might study in order to predict the production of potatoes in that particular area for the next 5 years. The manager might take the data which is available for the past 5 years, right? But the manager might collect the data from the farmers for the past 5 years. For in each year, what is the production rate of the potato in that particular village from the particular farmer or from different farmers. So he or she can collect the data from different farmers for the past 5 years. For each year, what is the production rate of potatoes, and based on the past 5 years production rate, the manager might be able to predict for the next 5 years production using trend analysis method. So manager would be able to focus on big picture, right? And if the manager has the data in hand, if the manager has information, it would back their judgments, for making effective decisions. It would back judgments, it would act as a backing judgment for the managers. And if the data is available, it will ensure the quality of decision making by the managers. And if the data is available with the managers, it will enable them to make right decisions. It will also enable them to identify risks, and it will also enable them to evaluate, challenge past decisions, right? Now we would get into types of research. Why do we have to study these types of research? Why do we have to know what type of research one would have to carry out? It is important. Why? Let us see. Let us take an example. Let us say you are telling me I want to draw. So what I would do? You have just given me the information of that you would like to draw. So what I would do? I would get some papers, a few papers, and pencils and color pencils, right? And I would give it to you. Then you would say, what is it? Oh, you don't want this, or this is not you were expecting. Then I might run back and say I would get a crayons for you, or the acrylic paint for you. Then again you would say, this is not the one which I wanted. Then I would ask you, what is your problem? What is that you want? Then you would say, I would get into engineering drawing. If I would have known what you want to do, I would have gotten you the right instruments to do it, right? I would have gotten you the drafter, or I would have gotten you different types of scales, or I would have gotten you different types of pencils, 2B, 5B, right? Different types of pencils I would have got for you, but I didn't know what you want to do, so I was not able to get you the right materials for you. The same way, if we don't know what type of research we are going to carry out, or what is that we want to know, then the research may not be effective. The findings or the results may not be effective. We would have to understand what type of research we are going to do in order to develop mechanisms, or in order to identify the right methodology to collect the data, right mechanisms to carry out the data collection or data information, or right methodology or right mechanisms or right tools to carry out the research. So, for that, the types of identifying what type of research you are going to get into is very, very important. Okay, now let's look at the first type of classification, the basic versus applied research. Okay, basic research. Basic research attempts to expand the limits of knowledge. It is not directly involved in the solution to a problem, pragmatic problem. It is also called as fundamental research, right? Fundamental. It is known to everybody. Like, for example, yoga is good for health. Doing yoga is good for health. That is known to all. Yes, that is known to everybody, right? So, it attempts to expand the limits of knowledge. Like, organic farming is good for the health of the people, right? It will not spoil the quality of the soil. So, it is a fundamental research. The basic it attempts to expand the limits of knowledge, whereas applied research, it is conducted when a decision must be made about a specific real life problem. Applied research says, how can I use this? For example, let us take the same example of yoga. Yoga is good for health, but if you have breathing problems, if you use pranayama, then your lung capacity can be improved. So, that is applied research. That is applied research, right? So, then the next classification is descriptive versus analytical. Descriptive is studying the status quo. Studying the status quo. It obtains information regarding current status of the phenomenon. What exists with respect to situational variables. For example, a researcher is going to a village and studying the organic farming done by a farmer, or different types of farmers. So, the researcher would study what type of crops are cultivated, how it is done, what type of manure is used, or natural fertilizers are used. Just studying the status quo, just studying what it exists, what is happening, or what has happened, or what is happening right now. So, just studying the status quo is descriptive research. Analytical research, so the researcher have collected these data from different farmers about the organic farming, or about the different crops that they are cultivating. Now, the researcher would analyze the already studied information, already collected data, right. So, that is analytical research, analyzing the existing data, right. The other classification is qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative research is usually used in behavioral sciences, behavioral research, whereas if you have to study the attitudes, emotions, or behaviors of the people, then using in-depth interviews would be good, would be beneficial than, because it is not quantifiable. If you want to also explore a new research like mentoring relationships in Indian organizations, right. So, it is not yet explored, and we do not know how to quantify the what do mentors learn. by being in the mentoring relationship. There are no studies that have carried out, so that we can develop an instrument to measure those, right? It cannot be quantifiable. That's circumstances. In those situations, in order to come out with the scales or come out with the items for studying, for items for quantifiable items to bring into quantifiable terms, we might tend to do qualitative research. We carry out qualitative research in identifying, and we do in qualitative research, in-depth interviews can be carried out, focus group discussions or observations can be done, and it is like we would be coming to subjective conclusions. Those are which cannot be quantifiable. Qualitative research are those which cannot be quantifiable, right? The quantitative research are those which can be quantifiable. Whereas, so for example, the self-efficacy theory, which is proposed by A. Bandura, right? Bandura, then this can be there is an instrument which is already available. So using this instrument, if we administer it to the respondents, we will be able to collect data and we will be able to analyze the data. We will be able to quantify. So based on the statements, how they have, if we can choose Likert scale or 7-point scale, and then we can use different statistical tools to analyze the data. So it is quantifiable. So whether certain 50% of the population are having high self-efficacy, or 60%. If we are doing a study in IT organizations, we could say among the middle level management, 50% of the employees have high self-efficacy, 30% of the employees in top management will have high self-efficacy, and 20% of the employees in the lower level or shop floor employees have high self-efficacy. So using the instrument, we will be able to quantify it. So that's quantitative research. The next type of classification is conceptual versus empirical. So conceptual research is developing new concepts or theories, like the one which I mentioned about self-efficacy theory or a learning theory, which is so that's a conceptual research, right? And yeah, the conceptual research, developing new concepts or theories. Right, for if we take the example of organic farming again, let's say organic farming. So we come out with this that you have to use such type of neem leaves or any other leaves which are available locally to make natural fertilizers, and this is the composition that you have to be followed to prepare that natural fertilizer, and it has to be administered in this proposition. So that is conceptual. Empirical research is, so the theory, the self-efficacy theory is already proposed by A. Bandura. So we are going to study that. We are going to administer that theory, and we are going to study among the employees or among the people, and to identify or to find out the results or to conclude. So that's empirical research. So it's experimenting to test theories or form basis for new theories, right? So that's empirical research. So we have conceptualized that the farmer have to use such and such type of materials to prepare a natural fertilizer, and it has to be administered in such proposition. So now the farmer will test that. Will test those natural fertilizers in their land. So the researcher would go and study how effective it has been, in using those natural fertilizers. That is empirical research. It can be administered, it will be, the researcher would be studying it with different types of farmers who have administered this natural fertilizers or have used these organic farming methodologies and come out with conclusions or findings. That's empirical research. So how do you determine when to conduct business research? The first, let's look into it, the time constraints. Let us say if the manager has sufficient time available before making a decision, right? Then the manager might, then it is suggested that the manager can get into formal and systematic way of conducting research. If there is no time available, if the decision has to be made, quickly, then the manager has no time to do this systematic way of doing research. Have to take decisions based on intuitions. If there is sufficient time available, then it is suggested that the researcher or the manager have to carry out research systematically. Right. The next one is availability of data. Is the information already available on hand with the manager is sufficient, then there is no need of conducting research. If it is not sufficient, the manager, it is suggested that the manager do the systematic way of carrying out this research. It is suggested that the manager have to do the research before making any decision. Right. The next, nature of decision. Is the decision of considerable strategic or tactical importance? Does it has an impact on the long term future of the organization? Does it has an effect on the strategic level of the organization? Then the manager or the management have to do research before making any decisions, before coming out with any decisions for the organization. Then the next is benefits versus cost. Does the value of the research information exceed the cost of conducting research? Then it is suggested that the manager go for conducting research. If no, then there is no need of conducting business research. So the value should exceed the estimated cost. So what are some of the steps to be looked into while making strategic decisions? The first one is identifying problems or opportunities, identification of challenges or opportunities. How do you identify? How does a researcher identify challenge or opportunity? By carrying out market research. So if the organization wanted to understand why there is low demand for certain type of products manufactured by the organization, then the organization may have to get into market research, may have to go and study why the customers are not preferring to buy certain type of products. What are some of the challenges, or what are some of the problems with the product? What are the expectations of the customers? So that can be studied using market research. They have to conduct surveys with the customers or consumers with a set of questions and understand why there is low demand for certain type of products, why customers are not preferring to buy these. Are there any substitutes available for the products that the organization is manufacturing? So in order to understand that, the organization have to carry out market research. Then the organization surveys may also be conducted in the organization to study the attitudes of the employees, or to study whether the employees are satisfied in the organization, whether they are satisfied with their job or with their task or with their work. The organization surveys can also be carried out to identify what are some of the challenges that they are facing while they are carrying out a particular kind of tasks. Also to identify the need for training, or to identify why there is a low performance among the employees in the organization, right? So the surveys can be conducted to identify those challenges, right? And employee engagement surveys can also be carried out to understand how if effectively employees are participating or engaged in the organization. And identifying challenges at the right time will pay way for them, or will pay way for an organization to have an opportunity. Okay, I will tell you how can we convert this challenge, identification of challenge, into an opportunity. One of my friends in Pune, she used to organize treasured holidays. too. She used to take them to villages to introduce them to their customs, the village customs, and also to the artisans, handicrafts who manufacture some locally available materials, products. They make products using locally available materials. It could be clothes or articrafts, or any beautiful showcase piece, right? But during this pandemic situation, she was not able to take them to the villages, and thereby the people were also not able to sell their products to the visitors or to the tourists. So their livelihoods were affected. So what she has done, she started marketing their produce through digital media. She started marketing hand woven materials, right? So she used to she started marketing these hand woven materials made by hand, and made by artisans. She started marketing them through WhatsApp groups and through her network, and the villages started sending these final products through post office. They used to send to the customers through post office. So sitting in their locations, sitting in their places, they were able to market their products. So the challenge has been converted into an opportunity during this pandemic situation, right? So then next step in making decisions is diagnose and assess. So you have to identify the root causes of the challenges. You have identified the challenges, that they were not able to market the produce that is manufactured within the village. So what is the underlying factor? Because during the pandemic situation, the transportation has come to an halt. They were not able to move their produce from their places to nearby cities, right? So you have to identify the underlying factors for the problems. Then you understand, you study what can be done to solve that challenges. So to convert the challenge into opportunity. So in the second step, we saw that it is important to understand the root causes of underlying factors, the challenges, the underlying factors that causes the problems or the challenges, right? So in the third step, we could implement some of the tools to understand in depth about the challenge or the problem. So there are certain tools that can be used. One such thing is dipstick survey. Dipstick by definition means a measuring rod that is dipped into a container to indicate the depth of liquid in it. It is just like an exploratory research which is conducted to measure the scope or depth of a problem. Dipstick survey is basically a survey with open-ended questions in it, where people are free to speak up their mind to get opinion and information, especially on a single use. We will take the same example of treasured holidays, which I mentioned about my friend. So in order to understand in depth about the challenge that the artisans or hand weavers facing, she tried to use this dipstick survey. She explored with the different artisans or different hand weavers that how can we solve this challenge. So of not able to market their products, how can we solve this challenge of finding a livelihood for the artisans or hand weavers. So through that exploratory research, she identified that if she can get the demand for some of the products, or if she can get a buy-in from her from the customers or consumers, so if she can forward or send, if she can share those information to the artisans or hand weavers, they will be able to manufacture the products that is required based on the demand, and then it can be sent to different parts of the country. So through that is the way she was able to identify based on the exploratory research or based on the in-depth communication with the farmers or the artisans or the weavers, hand weavers, right. So Initially she was carrying out these type of exploratory research to identify the challenges, to solve the challenges, and identified a way to solve their livelihood problems, to solve their non-marketability of the produce or the products that the artisans or hand weavers are manufacturing. After she used this dipstick service, then she started using estimating the market potential. So based on the demand based on the demand from the customers or the consumers for the products, for the past 1 year, she could estimate the market potential or demand for those products for the next 1 year, and she was able to provide that information or share that information to artisans or hand weavers. And one another, based on this estimating the market potential, then is forecasting. You can also forecast forecast the demand for the next 5 years based on the last 5 years production, or based on the last 5 years demand for the product. The manager or the researcher would be able to forecast for the next 5 years, for the next 5 years demand for the products, or 5 years demand for the produce, right. The next step is evaluation of the action course. Now let us take the same example of treasured holidays. Now that she started implementing this action, she started getting the demand for the products for the artisans and hand weavers, and she used to share the information, and the products have been delivered to different parts of the country. Now she has implemented it. It is important to evaluate the action that has been implemented. So at the end of the year, she could evaluate how effective this strategy has been, right. So that is very, very important. It is not enough if we just implement the action. It is necessary to evaluate the actions. Today we looked at what is research, types of research, and when do we conduct research, and how do we, before making strategic management decisions, what are the steps that needs to be followed, and role of statistics in managerial decisions, right. In the next session, we will look at research process step by step in detail.